I'm Simon Hartzell, and this is NAI Global's Diving into Commercial Real Estate.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of NAI's Diving into Commercial Real Estate. With us today is our sponsor, Rethink CRM, and the CEO of Rethink CRM, Vijay Mehra. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me today, Simon.
So tell us a little bit about Rethink CRM, your background, the organization's background, and how this can benefit the real estate community.
Sure, absolutely. So I started Rethink CRM out of a small apartment in New York City about 10 years ago after working in commercial real estate and finding it extremely difficult to manage data, manage my pipeline, and all the other attributes to running commercial real estate. And so I set off and partnered up with Salesforce.com and created a commercial real estate specific application built on top of their platform. And so today we've grown the business quite a bit. We have hundreds of brokerages across the country and even globally using Rethink today to manage their business. We manage everything from contact relationship all the way to prospecting, deal management, all the way throughout commission and payout of a deal. And so we literally can manage every aspect of a commercial broker's business within Rethink. And what's even nicer about it is we get to leverage the power of Salesforce.com's platform. So we've got the most innovative technology powering us. It's scalable, so it can work for a single broker all the way through thousands of brokerages and larger enterprise organizations.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome to have the capability to bring a client's clients, if I can use that phrase, but bring them up to an elevated level to help organize themselves and be more efficient. Question I have,
Absolutely.
What's the footprint of your organization? Where do you guys cover area-wise?
Sure. So we are based in Austin, Texas, and so everything that happens here in Austin. We've got our sales and marketing team, our client success team who ensures the success of every one of our clients, all the way to product and engineering who helps us take innovation and ideas from our clients and put it back into our product roadmap.
Perfect. And nationwide, global, all the above?
Oh, absolutely. So our clients are global. So we have clients in California all the way to New York and everything in between. And then we have clients in Australia, we have clients in the UK, Southeast Asia, and so it's, again, because we're built on the Salesforce platform, we can easily translate to any language, any currency, and it's a very flexible platform, meaning we can adopt just about any business process and any brokerage's process, which is one of the big reasons our clients love us.
That's perfect, yeah, and a business that's gone global already, it's nice to have a company like yourself to help complement and work well with their organization. Who do you find is your ideal client for your product or service?
Sure. So we used to see a big trend with smaller teams, anywhere from 1 to, let's say, 4 brokers. And the tool works great for that sort of size teams, but we've sort of found our sweet spot in what we call our mid-market, anywhere from, let's say, 10 to about 100 brokerages, or 10 to 100 brokers rather. And the reason for that is because these are the teams that can really take advantage of each other's data. They can really set up a system and tool that's going to help drive their business forward and gain the visibility and insight into metrics and data to help them analyze how they want to move their business and how they want to strategically position their business, whether it's in a particular market, particular set of markets, and so forth. And so, it's not so much a one size fits, or I'm sorry, it's not so much this is all we're tackling, but we've seemed to find our sweet spot again within that 10 to 100 broker team size, or brokerage size rather.
Perfect. And last question, how does someone listening to this episode of the podcast get a hold of you or your organization?
Absolutely. So if anyone is interested in reaching out to me directly, they can reach me via email at vijay@rethinkcrm.com. Alternatively, they can send an email directly to our sales team. That's sales@rethinkcrm.com.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time, Vijay, and interesting to learn more about Rethink CRM. Thank you again for being our sponsor.
Thanks again for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of NAI Global's Diving into Commercial Real Estate. Today's episode is all about data, and we're very fortunate to have a guest with us today, a gentleman by the name of Steve Coutts with a firm called Reis. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Simon. Glad to be here.
Great. Steve's background, Steve, if you don't mind, I'm going to share with our audience here. Senior Vice President of Sales at Reis, which is a commercial real estate data and analytics company. Steve has over 25 years experience in operations, sales management, and research management within the commercial real estate space. Steve has over 25 years of experience in operations, sales management, and research management within the commercial real estate space. His strengths are with team building, decision making, improved efficiencies, and revenue generation. I'd like to thank Steve for joining us today. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Simon. Look forward to chatting with you.
Great. We're going to jump right in. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, your experience over the 25 years.
Sure. It's been quite a run. I'm a big believer that everything you do leads to the next thing you do. And I would say I think I've been in this space, 28 years now, either commercial real estate information, research, sales, or analytics in some way, shape, or form. I actually started in the early 90s. I was a broker in Boston for several years, and then I started my own company, which was the first MLS for commercial real estate in Boston, called the Boston Commercial Real Estate Network. And I grew that for several years. I had about 100 or so customers in that market. This is before the likes of Realty Information Group or CoStar came online. In mid-1995 or thereabouts, I actually folded my company into Realty Information Group, which was later went public as CoStar. And then over the next 7 years, I think I was probably the 28th employee of CoStar at the time. And over the next 7 years, I ran sales for them. And help them open up new markets. They went from, about 3 or 4 markets, D.C., New York, Metro, to about 50-plus markets during the 7 years that I was there. And then post-dot-com bust, so to speak, I moved on. I went back into brokerage for a couple more years. And then when my commercial real estate information non-compete burnt off related to CoStar, I worked with Reis on a special project developing a portfolio evaluation credit risk tool that they developed for lenders. And then the next 10 years, I actually went from being on the vendor side to being a user of services. I spent 10 years as the National Director of Research for Saville Studley. The fun thing about that is I literally had access to dozens and dozens of commercial real estate information platforms, business information platforms, GIS-type platforms, and I was just enjoying being able to just pick and choose from the best of for the various projects. After that 10-year period, I was recruited to run sales for Xceligent for a short period of time. As we all know, they ran out of funding not so long ago, and so I actually left before they actually closed their doors and took a little time off. And then I was back at Reis. Reis was looking for someone to run new business sales, someone who had experience in commercial real estate information, understood how to apply their analytics to the greater picture, and now here I am.
That's awesome. And being so versed in the last 25 years, how have you seen information and the commercial real estate industry kind of transition over that 25-year period?
It's actually been pretty amazing to watch and be a part of. As you know, early 90s, it was a matter of who has the most information, who has the know, who knows where the listings are, who knows where the buildings are that are for sale. information was shared in kind of archaic manners based on, calling or faxing back and forth. And that was actually one of the reasons why I developed the Boston Commercial Real Estate Network. It was to develop a more efficient way for at least the Boston real estate community to start sharing information. So in the mid-90s, you saw kind of this concept of listing clearinghouses emerge. Companies like Realty Information Group, later known as CoStar, Black Sky, New Jersey, and several other markets relocate in Boston and New York, and then like RE Source in Chicago. So there were several of these, call it centralized research organizations that saw that if there was a one call in, one call out to the market, it could create efficiencies for all the players in the market. So that process began. Initially, the publications were via books. The Cornerstone, Black Sky, Yale Robbins books, things like that were on the shelves of every real estate professional. And again, the flow of information was primarily, or at least the efficiencies were brought to primarily the sharing of building information and listings data. At the same time that this kind of the sharing of basic listings for sale data was going online, Reis had been actually since 1980 surveying various markets to understand the analytic component, understand market fundamental trends and forecasts in light of economic and demographic data. But primarily, Reis was focused on serving the lending community to determine whether or not they were going to loan on a given property and things like that. So that was kind of going on behind the scenes, and it wasn't immediately apparent to most of the other players in the space that they even existed. And then, again, listing service progressed 1995 to about 2003 or so. These proactive listing services moved from different delivery mechanisms. I mean, originally it was like disk updates and CD-ROMs, and then they went online as the speeds improved. And at the same time, which is interesting, is there was also a concern by the industry that third-party information providers, particularly listing services, were going to dominate the market. Actually, the fact is that many of the largest players in the country gave up or handed over their historical databases to CoStar in the mid to late 90s. So proprietary data was really not something that was maintained anymore by research departments, and it was becoming a little troubling to the industry. So there was this concept that if there was a local MLS participation, basically brokers could get together and share information, maybe that was an alternative way to go. So platforms like Xceligent emerged, which were kind of like technology platforms for brokers in various markets to share information, and dozens of others. Well, what ended up happening is post.com kind of bust, many of these players left or failed because they really weren't funded properly or able to make enough money. And what remained were those firms that were focused on proactive research, CoStar, Reis, Real Capital Analytics, and the like. And then as we move, go ahead. Question?
Sorry. No. It's interesting to hear kind of that transition from early days of data and how industry professionals, agents, brokers, and other people in different lines of the business have kind of progressed from this data that's been collected year over year. How have you found the processes or methodologies to work most efficiently and benefit the user?
That's a good question. I mean, there's this again back to the concept of shared listing services or MLS. Will MLS work for commercial real estate, right? And what's happening, what we've experienced over the many years, is that brokers don't like to update information, right? So if you have listing services that are kind of shared services, there tends to be holes in the data. There tends to be, as you might show a tenant six opportunities, but if there's 3 or 4 that you don't know about, that's enough to lose the deal. Same thing with properties for sale and things like that. So voluntary listing services just weren't cutting it and haven't cut it over the many years. So those that survived were ones which actually made the investment in research headcount, so that they could actually do proactive research, calling on all the building owners, contacts, property managers, you name it, tenants, in order to build those databases. And those are ultimately those that have survived. In addition to that, those same information providers had to go from just tracking core 4, or, office industrial initially to office industrial apartment retail, and then expanding that further. So they also had to expand into other sectors, and we saw that over time. So it's really, the key thing is really proactive research, proprietary data sets, and ultimately continuing to expand services to create efficiencies for the market.
So I'm curious, just based on your opinion, why hasn't a true MLS or I guess comparing it to the residential field, which is a completely different animal, why an MLS has never really caught on, or is it called something else, which we obviously know of today?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we had full information, we probably would have seen about 100 different firms that attempted this for the commercial real estate space. And the residential space is different in that local MLSs can make it a requirement to post listings, make it a requirement to make sure the information is cleansed, purged, and removed in a timely fashion, things like that. As it relates to a commercial MLS concept, it's tough to get everybody in the same room to agree to the rules of the game. So there tends to be limited participation or not complete participation, and understanding all available data or data points is critical. The other thing is you have challenges of old data or moldy data, so to speak, lingering in the site. So then users tend to go there less and less frequently. And then a larger problem is that listings are part of the game, but understanding and putting a property, a space, or a building for sale in the context to the market trends. How is this building priced relative to the market historically or currently? And unless you have a complete inventory and call it surveying of the marketplace, you cannot build reliable market statistics. So ultimately what Reis was founded on, the founding principles, is that we're going to track data in the same way, based on the same criteria across all sectors, across all markets. So that it allows users to understand historical trends, forecasts, and benchmarking across sectors, across markets, across submarkets. And you can't get that from just a posting or a listing service. So there's multiple reasons why it hasn't succeeded in the past. To say that it will never happen, no, I think ultimately the direction in the market is in fact we'll see more and more listing data and building data available via Google search. But what's going to be lacking is the ability to really put the current opportunity in context to market trends and the direction of markets.
Interesting. Well, let's talk current. Let's take a look at the now and how does a user, a broker, or industry professional in the commercial real estate space differentiate or choose between information providers that are out there?
Very good question. I mean, it's really first question that we discuss with our team and and talking with any member of the real estate community is what's your specialty, right? I mean, are you a landlord rep, broker, investment sales, asset management, portfolio management, corporate services? What is your specialty? What do you profess to be an expert at? That's the first question. The second is what are based off of your clients, what are the client demands and what are their expectations? If the client demands are, let's take tenant rep for example. If the client demand is simply show me the spaces that are available, take me out on a tour, and negotiate my lease. And I'm not asking exactly I don't need to understand how much negotiation power I have, how long my lease should be, where are we in the market cycle, those types of things. Okay, fine. A listing service is fine. Or on a landlord rep basis, if you're representing a landlord, if it's good enough just to know, what other blocks of space are available that compete with mine, all well and good. But if you want to understand how the market, sub-market is changing, how much leverage I have with my tenants and things like that, it's a different story. So it all comes down to client expectations and whether or not the real estate professional feels obligated to up their game and go beyond just the basics of posting it online or putting a sign out in front and wants to provide some advice or context to their client. So it's just a matter of how sophisticated are you. And the other challenge too is most small, medium-sized shops out there don't have their research teams or personnel to compete with some of the larger firms, so that becomes a challenge as well. And then it's a matter of, well, are you up against some of the larger players in your market who have resources, manpower resources in the research area? Then what tools can I tap into that can help me compete?
That's a great point. We'll come back to that in a little bit here, because I think you brought up a great topic, which is brokerage size and capabilities and capital, and we'll come back to that. So great points in regards to kind of current. Where, if you had a crystal ball, where do you see the development of data and analytics over the next year, 5 years, 10 years within our business? And it's, of course, very subjective.
Yeah. Again, well, first of all, we've seen the kind of the way information is delivered and the speed at which it's delivered and the comprehensiveness in which it's been delivered, over time change, from books to online to web, and ultimately we're seeing more and more demand for kind of custom data integration into models that might be developed by firms, or API integration of our data and things like that. So the way the data is being delivered is changing quite a bit. Now, what do we see going forward? Ultimately, we're seeing a whole nother chapter in, CRE tech, fintech.com type tech players come to the market that want to create or think they can find a niche where they can create efficiencies, workflow, deliver some types of tools that are going to improve the game for the commercial real estate professional. Go ahead, question.
Sorry to cut you off there. Yeah, I was at a conference not too long ago where there were a presenter showing a slide of all the tech companies in the commercial real estate space, and they could barely fit it on the slide. There's so many. Maybe can you comment on the number of startups that you've seen, or how competitive is that space, and how quickly is it changing?
Yeah, it's again, there's a lot of money being thrown at this space. Obviously, the real estate industry is a huge asset class. Everyone sees it as a great opportunity to invest in. And I would say there's hundreds. We've actually, in many cases, we have startups that have created a slick platform or analysis platform. But what they need, and what almost all of these need, is some type of data to make it work. And the data can be provided either by the end user, and typically the end user has pretty good detail on the property or opportunity or whatever they're looking to analyze. But the other thing is they require some level of context and putting the property in context. So many of these firms have reached out to us to see whether or not they can tap into our data, historical, forecast, current, market fundamental trends, et cetera, into their platforms to kind of make them work. And it's my opinion that you have. I mean, we've seen cases. There's an argument, and there's some in the information space that believe that all information that's meaningful to the CRE industry is already publicly available, and if you create the tools and the search engines and the scrape engines to pull that data and aggregate it efficiently, then you have everything you need. I'm not a big believer in that. I think if the data is not collected in a standardized format over time, then it's essentially meaningless. Trends become meaningless and things like that. So I think ultimately the players that are going to add value and survive are going to be those that are willing to and engage and link up with firms that have historical and proprietary data sets that they can plug into. And then those that can actually truly add value in whether it's, valuation, customer service management, whatever workflow. There's many, many small niches that are not being served by the information providers that can in fact be served by some of these tech companies. Those that don't have the funding in or don't align themselves with a strong information provider ultimately are going to have a really cool basket with nothing in it.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, because it's pretty much what I'm hearing, and from what you're saying, is that one company needs another in order to survive. It's not just somebody dominating or taking it over, which is quite interesting if that's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. How do you see Reis differentiate themselves in a competitive data analytics market? You can comment on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because when you talk about data providers, information providers, everyone kind of puts them in the same bucket. I think one of the challenges that the industry professionals face is just data overload. I mean, another information system, another set of data. How do I make sense of it? How do I combine it? How do I work with it? And it's not that the information is not out there. It's the time and effort it takes to assemble the information, to report on the information, and come up with meaningful answers to the questions that the clients are asking. What Reis has built their platform on, and again, initially servicing kind of the top lenders in the nation, is kind of a quick 1-2 punch in regards to how does my property performing against this comp group? How does it perform against the sub-market? How is it performing against its market? Give me those key benchmarks to understand its general performance, and then just a couple of clicks of a button generate custom market write-ups, whether it's the property level, the sub-market level, the market level. So I think one of the key things that Reis does is it just doesn't provide data, but it actually provides the answers that are being asked by the clients and assembling that in a quick and efficient manner. Quite frankly, you can run a query in our platform on a given property, and with just about 4 or 5 clicks, generate a market report that's 150 pages deep. You can also click 1 or 2 clicks, and you'll have a 3-page write-up that will put the property in its context of its comp group, sub-market, market with just a couple clicks if you just need a quick narrative. So that's a key differentiator as it relates to Reis versus other information providers that are just providing the data and not providing the answers. The other thing is I'm a big believer in understanding market trends, market fundamental trends in the context of economic and demographic data. Has that changed over time? And every one of the cycles that we've seen over the last 4 market cycles we're all different in some way, shape, or form. There's a relationship between eco-demo data and market fundamentals. And the only way a provider or analytics provider or like Reis or anyone else can actually speak to and draw conclusions from the data is if they've actually been tracking the data for an extended period of time. The last ramp up since 2008, people's like scratching their heads. This is, we're going on 10 years here. What's going on? The prior cycle is different. So I think another area is understanding industry, basically market trends over multiple cycles. And again, Reis has been doing it since 1980. And you can't just start up tomorrow, an operation tomorrow, and say, okay, we're going to provide historical data. If you're not building it from day one based off of the same fundamental data collection methodologies across sectors, then you're just not going to have that component.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there are some professionals that have the opinion that historical data is I don't want to say worthless, but it's not as critical as current data.
And I think that's a good point. I mean, obviously, if on a scale of kind of importance, right? Obviously, what's available today, what the comp groups today relative to rent comps, sales comps, and that's what Reis delivers as well. Is what's my immediate competition look like? How do I immediately value this property? That said, turning points, right? I mean, Michael Colacino, who's the president of Stavros Studley, his thing that he taught me when I was there is that the money is made in the turning points in this industry, anticipating the turning points. How long a lease do I sign if I got a year's left worth of a uptick, or at what point do I buy if the market's going down, and how long is it going to be declining? So understanding the length of cycles, what causes cycles, and what some of the indicators as it relates to the direction of things are critical. So if I'm going to hold for 5 years or 2 years, if I'm going to do a 10-year lease and lock in my rent versus a short term. So it's definitely secondary to what's the opportunity I'm looking at now. But once you've identified the opportunity, whether it's a lease or whether it's a building to purchase, understanding the market dynamics related to that property to figure out the strategy going forward is critical.
So you mentioned that Reis, and I'm assuming that Reis has been around for 38 years?
Yep, since early 1980s. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you said the company started in the financial space, dealing with lenders. Who today is really the value or who can get the most value out of Reis today? I'm assuming it goes way beyond lenders, just based on what you're saying.
Yes, I mean, it absolutely started with lenders. I mean, because the way it works is, as lenders and underwriters, they would obviously evaluate a particular asset to loan on, and there's the book, so to speak, required kind of a stamp of approval, right? And historically, dating back to the 90s, including a Reis report into that origination package was a required component. So as a result, we've seen we're actually servicing about 90% of the top 50 lenders nationally. Then the next logical step was those that are obviously underwriting, but also the portfolio managers that are managing entire, whether it's a lender portfolio or on the equity side. How are my assets in the various markets performing relative to the submarket market? Should I be in an apartment in Boston? Should I be in office in Houston? Those types of questions. And then also applies to asset managers, property managers to a certain degree. But then the most logical is that if lenders and non-bank lenders are evaluating whether or not they're going to make a given loan on a property, it's only logical that the buyers or investor community or even the selling community also be looking through the same set of glasses as it relates to evaluating the market, evaluating the comp group submarket, things like that. So it rolls into the buyers and investors. Valuation experts is a logical tie-in, and appraisers, where they need to obviously put a value on it based off of the various approaches to valuation, and we support all of those approaches. And last but not least, brokerage and real estate advisors, who historically have used kind of listing services and things like that. Many have recognized the fact that to compete in this day and age, they need to up their game. They need to meet client expectations, and ultimately the minimal increased cost related to adding a Reis type platform onto their portfolio of information services becomes somewhat of a no-brainer in order to compete in the market and be in business in the years to come.
Well, that's great overview. I think based on our audience that are going to be listening is very diverse. We've got, as you mentioned, kind of asset managers to brokers to owners to everything in between listening to this podcast. So, but give us an example. Let's say in the brokerage community, how can the brokers really take advantage of the Reis platform of services and maybe even get more specific and just say investment sales?
Good question. So as a user of Reis, even when I was at Saville Studley, one of the biggest time sucks, so to speak, was supporting in the area of investment sales, for example, supporting and drafting offer memorandum, right? Typically there's a plethora of data about the subject property that's being marketed. From rent rolls, you name it, it's there. But putting that opportunity in context to the submarket market and where the trends are in that market, that becomes a challenge. But the other challenge is simply doing the write-up. In other words, just putting pen to paper and saying, I got all this data, now I need to explain what's happening. So that's one area. We have a report that Reis just developed. Historically, we generate market level narratives and sub-market level narratives. But now we've developed an ability for a user to select the specific rent comps and sales comps associated with the property, also benchmark that property to the submarket market, and with just a couple of clicks generate a rather comprehensive, 3-page narrative write-up that basically puts it all. It's somewhat of an automated type of there's a technology involved, but essentially it writes the report for you and explains all the transitions, all the trends, the directions of things, as well as works in economic and demographic trends. So that's one area as far as generating offer memorandum and the like. The other thing, actually using the same tool, I kind of think of business development. The last thing you would do, time being at a premium, is doing too much research on a given prospect's property. And you're just not going to do it unless you know that it's worth your time to do it, and you have a good chance of winning the deal. That said, some of the tools that we have that are literally, you can generate very comprehensive reports in a matter of 3 to 5 minutes. You could be using these as business development teasers. This is the type of market knowledge that we have. This is what we know about your property. This is what we know about your submarket. So you could literally use our data on a volume basis to kind of ping or touch potential prospects on a new business side. And then obviously the other part is how, where are the cycles, where's the turning point, how much more runway do we have on rents increasing? Do we to what extent year over year have we seen rental rate increases? And then in the context to maybe office employment, if it's an office property, what's the relationship there? All the components that are going to determine whether or not this is a 2-year flip or a 10-year hold or whatever the case may be. So it goes, but the most logical is supporting, reporting, offering memorandum, business development, and then digging deeper is to analyze exactly, what's the strategy for the asset.
Well, and I think you kind of covered the point which you brought up earlier about brokerage sizes. Even within NAI or other firms outside, there's the firm size. Some firms don't have the department to be able to handle that capability. Either they don't have the budget to hire personnel, or their structure just doesn't warrant it. So, from what I'm hearing is Reis could be that fill in the gap and save them time, money, and resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the challenge is this: is you have, there are information providers and technology platforms that serve niches in this space. So you have those that track sales comp data and provide cap rates like RCA. You have others that track space available like CoStar. You have economic and demographic providers like Moody's Analytics that provides the trends and the BLS data that's supposed to determine the demand and all those things. And these are all of these different services that, to your point, if you don't have, one, the budget to spend on all of them, and two, a centralized specialist to assemble it and pull it together, analyze it, and provide the answers, then you're challenged. The beautiful thing about Reis is we've actually pulled all those pieces together, all the critical pieces from rent comps to sales comps to trends to economic demographic data, and then rolling it all up in a narrative. So you don't even require, I mean, granted, I'm a big believer in research. I ran a research department, but I think researchers can be doing other things than just calling and verifying availabilities or combining Excel spreadsheets. They can be put to use in a lot better ways. And so Reis has really developed a platform that the end user, the broker analyst, you name it, the asset manager, whatever the case may be, can run these reports with just a few clicks, incredibly simple, and it's pulling together all of the components and all the data that's really relied on by the industry.
Interesting. And that's kind of the important point is, all right, if in a firm size, be it a 10-person firm, sometimes the top producer is also the owner. So now it's a matter of efficiency that you kind of touched on, which I think is a great point. Unfortunately, we're out of time, Steve. So,
okay. All right.
And I feel like we're getting into some real deep discussions here, which I love to have you back at some point to kind of keep diving into it and keep discussing certain points and driving a little bit deeper. But I want to thank you for taking the time today to speak to us, speak to the audience about your space, which I think is rapidly changing. And if you're not implementing or integrating any of these or learning more about them, then you're going to be left behind. That being said, what's the best way if our audience is curious to kind of pick your brain a little bit further and learn more about you and the background and the Reis services?
They can contact me directly. Again, I run all new business sales and API data sales for Reis. They can contact me at email address Steve.Coutts, Coutts, @Reis.com. That's Steve.Coutts @Reis.com. And they're also welcome to call me directly, 212-921-1122. My extension is 231. And I'd be glad to speak with anybody in regards to how we might be able to assist them, and then if appropriate, refer them to one of our team who can walk them through and give them a customized demonstration of our services.
Perfect, Steve. Thanks again. And if you'd like to find out more about becoming a new office with NAI Global, please email us at help@naiglobal.com or call us at 609-945-4047. Thank you for listening.